Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jack Douglas.
The day is as pleasant as any vacationer could hope for, and the San Francisco Bay Bridge is alive with quick-moving traffic. A huge warship steams past the bridge and is dwarfed by the giant span. Beyond the bridge, across the bay, is a magical city which has a certain indefinable something setting it apart from and above most of the world's great cities. Now, the people who live here will not leave here. Those who are forced to leave can't wait until they get back. Why? What is that certain something this city has that others do not? Well, many have tried and failed to answer the question, but we will neither try nor perhaps fail. Instead, we will ask you to be the judge as we now spend 2 weeks and 30 minutes in San Francisco, the city that is Baghdad by the bay. It has been said of San Franciscans that they regard almost everything in the city as an institution. The bridges, for example, bridges that could not possibly be built, but the bridges were built and became landmarks. They'll point out the City Hall, and casually you'll be informed that their City Hall is 16 feet taller than the nation's capital. The city's old homes are especially an institution, treasured heirlooms of the Victorian era. Lombard Street is also an institution, the crookedest street in the world. And incidentally, the picture postcard of this street outsells any other San Francisco postcard. The slope is 40 degrees, but when you're actually driving this winding thoroughfare, it looks more like 180 degrees, almost straight down. From the unbelievable, let's turn to the sublime, the Mission Dolores, the cradle of San Francisco. Founded in June of 1776, it is the sixth of the missions established in Upper California by the Franciscan Fathers. Towering beside it is the present church, started in 1782, only 6 years after the mission was founded. Yes, this tiny mission gave birth to the cosmopolitan giant now known as San Francisco. Union Square is to San Francisco what Hyde Park is to London and Washington Square is to Greenwich Village in New York City. It is sanctuary. It is an armistice between the conformists, the nonconformists, and the in-betweens. Perhaps it is freedom. The right to do whatever one chooses without violating the laws. The right to take a nap in the sun. The right to quiet communion with the creatures of nature. The right to debate and exchange views, the right even to self-indignant expression. Yes, and even the right to parade your new hat and wonder if all who will see it will think as much of it as you did when you bought it. Union Square, another San Francisco institution. And so is the City Lights bookstore on Columbus near Broadway. Now, the shop and its part owner, known simply as Shig, symbolized the beatnik movement in literature, which had its beginning here in San Francisco 8 or 10 years ago. Two of the beatnik literary luminaries, Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, have been habitués of the City Light shop, and their work continues to outsell most of the titles on the racks. The distance between this and this is less than 20 paces. But the contrast is part of Chinatown near California and Grant Streets, where even the public telephone booths resemble a Chinese pagoda. Lotus Cakes is just another way of saying that this is where they make many of the Chinese fortune cookies sold throughout the world, and of course each cookie containing an optimistic prognostication of someone's fortune. Our host is Mr. Ernie Louie.
Every day we have many visitors coming into our plant to watch how fortune cookies are made. We have over 1,300 different fortunes, which I translate from books of Confucius, Lin Yutang, Aesop fables, and even Plato. But I found, after reading through them, that all the philosophy is about the same.
To my way of thinking, the real Chinatown does not appear until sundown after the shadows fall. And then how odd it seems to see the characters of the ancient Chinese alphabet outlined in 20th century neon. These are illustrations of Tai Chi Chuan, a Chinese art of exercise that predates Columbus by more than 6 centuries. Now the movements are simple, graceful, almost aesthetic, yet its practitioners believe that Tai Chi Chuan offers far more benefits than our present-day strenuous exercises.
Nearly 1,000 years ago, a Chinese Taoist monk named Zhang Sanfeng composed a set of exercise called Tai Chi Chuan. Today, even in the United Nations, some delegates from all over the world are practicing these exercises to keep them trim, fit, and mentally relaxed. Tai Chi Chuan is the answer for our strenuous life today. It requires no partners, no equipment, and one may practice at home. And the best of all, it fits people of all ages.
The cable cars of San Francisco are about as sacred as any of the city's many colorful institutions. But every now and then, some misguided reformer will advocate the removal of the cable cars, and man alive, it's as if somebody had kicked the flag on the 4th of July. Why, even flower stands are shaped like the beloved cable cars. Well, the cable cars are antiquated. Even the customers have to lend a helping hand to sort of turn the things around for the trip back. But as history has taught us so often, progress merely for the sake of progress is not progress at all. One of these passengers said to me with a perfectly straight face, "You know, Jack, one day we won't have these cable cars anymore." And I said, "When will that be?" And he suddenly broke out in laughter as he replied, "When the rabbit chases the fox and the turtle can climb the tree." Well, anyway, this Hyde Street car took us to the waterfront where at Pier 43½, we purchased tickets for a cruise of San Francisco Bay and the harbor. These bay cruise boats are double and triple decked, and there are frequent sailings beginning at 10 in the morning. These particular sightseeing boats are the only ones on the bay sailing under both major bridges, the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, and much later on, the magnificent Golden Gate, the world's longest single span. Once past the Golden Gate, the cruise boats make a sharp turn for the trip back. En route, you'll find yourself just a few hundred yards from Alcatraz Island, which until 1963 was the famous federal prison. While we were here, the fate of the island and the old prison buildings had not yet been decided. Some San Franciscans favor maintaining the prison as a tourist attraction. Others want the buildings torn down and the island converted into a tremendous amusement park. Not a bad idea. Well, perhaps the next time we visit the Bay Area, the matter will have been resolved. Permanently anchored at Fisherman's Wharf is a sailing vessel of a type and size rarely to be seen anywhere in the world. This is the Balclutha, the last full rigger to fly the American flag, the last of the Cape Horners, the last of hundreds of square riggers which at one time or another carried the name of San Francisco to the distant seaports of the earth. Rescued from oblivion by joint action of labor unions and business firms a few years ago, the Balclutha is now operated by the San Francisco Maritime Museum. Master mariner Jack Schickel, here weaving rope into a Napoleon bend mat, has spent more than half a century at sea on sail and steamships. But when he talked to us, he spoke only of the sailing vessels and the Cape Horners.
I wish I had $50 for every time I've been aloft on these ships. Of course, going aloft here alongside the dock when she's riding steady, that's nothing. It's when you're down along Cape Horn Road, say, in a gale of wind and ice and snow and sleet and everything else up there, and the ship rolling through an arc of 45 degrees, well, then it's a different thing altogether. That was the life, the old life. Of course, I go aloft whenever I can just to keep in practice. It might come back, then we'll do it again.
The Balclutha is just a short distance from the Maritime Museum, whose director, Mr. Carl Cortum, was the guiding spirit in saving the old vessel. The museum is rated one of the finest of its kind. These are figureheads from the days of wind and canvas, and the walls are adorned with hundreds of photographs, photos of famous individual ships and of whole sailing fleets. And here, a sample of a seaman's handiwork, an exquisite picture frame made entirely of rope. More seaman's art, the carving and painting of whale teeth. Now this is called scrimshaw work and was a favorite hobby of seamen on long whaling voyages. And this model of a German 5-masted full rigger was built by Eric Swanson in the course of 4.5 years and 5,000 hours of labor. The original vessel was built in Germany in 1902 and was lost in the English Channel in 1910. This now is not a model, but it isn't much bigger. Yet in 1962, a solitary seaman sailed this tiny thing, this mermaid, 5,000 miles across the Pacific from Japan to San Francisco. The journey lasted exactly 3 months and is one of the most extraordinary one-man voyages of all time. Harbor watching, harbor hawking they call it, is not a new idea, but it is still a favorite tourist pastime in the Bay Area. Not only is it inexpensive, it's absolutely free, and you don't even have to pretend that you're going anywhere or seeing anyone off. Just stand there and take in all the color and glamour of an ocean bon voyage. As for the passengers, well, of course they're excited, but chances are that they'll be back. For this much I know, Tony Bennett is not the only one who left his heart in San Francisco. San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf is, to quote the Chamber of Commerce, a touch of the old world in the heart of one of America's most cosmopolitan cities. Well, that it is. It's also a fascinating business. Groups of families operating as units, first catching the fish and then selling it. Most of the families on the wharf have been here for generations, and the business is handed down from father to son. If your time is limited, you can snack at the individual stalls and later enjoy a more formal dinner at fine restaurants such as Tarantino's. The crashing surf at the base of Point Lobos and 48th Avenues pounds away at Seal Rocks. Now the seals, actually they're sea lions, desert the rocks in summer to breed at a nearby island. Cliff House overlooks the rocks, and this famous restaurant dates back to 1863. They have a tramway connecting Cliff House with Point Lobos, and for 50 cents, you can cable over the surf for a thrill as well as a scenic treat. Golden Gate Park is one of the world's truly great parks. Its 1,000 acres contain dozens of major attractions, of which the Japanese tea garden is probably the most colorful. Here, in a classic setting that would do justice to the best in Japan, your Japanese hostess will serve you tea and delicious cookies, and perhaps she'll remind you that San Francisco is, after all, the gateway to the Orient. These visitors are John and Judith Langaker of Salem, Oregon. This enormous bronze Buddha is said to be the largest ever to leave the Orient, and nearby is a typical Japanese moon bridge, the kind that especially appeals to youngsters. A more conventional bridge seems to be the habitat of some of the tamest and friendliest squirrels I've ever seen. Now watch these cuties. We move on to the fine arts, the Palace of the Legion of Honor at Lincoln Park. And the moment you enter the spacious grounds, you have the feeling of being in France, perhaps at Versailles. Well, the architectural flavor is decidedly French, for the palace is based upon the Palace of Legion of Honor in Paris. This palace, like its Parisian counterpart of the same name, has more than architectural beauty to merit your time and attention. For here have been gathered some of man's most brilliant creative efforts, among them Rodin's The Thinker. Inside the Louis XVI salon, resurrected almost intact from a Parisian hotel of the 18th century, is a flashback to the golden age of pomp and circumstance. The real eye-catcher is this cabinet or commode attributed to Martin Carlin circa 1785. It is ebony with panels of Japanese lacquer mounted with bronze gilt. And from the hundreds of masterpieces, we chose these. El Greco's St. Peter. At the Milliner's, Monet. Here is one of Corot's lesser-known masterpieces, View of Rome. The Flemish school has this detailed offering, Madonna and Child enthroned with angels. Oh, there are hundreds of fine works here. We can't own them, but we can see them and enjoy them at the Palace of the Legion of Honor. Well, suddenly the time is sundown after the shadows fall. And down along the waterfront, the port of San Francisco gives every impression of having been tucked away at 10 o'clock. But listen and believe this, 10 p.m. in San Francisco is like noon in Oshkosh. Or to borrow a phrase from our younger set, this Baghdad by the Bay is a swingin' place. The small nameplate, Alexis, is much too modest, for this restaurant is just about as plush as any I've ever seen. It has been called a study in Byzantine splendor, and the interior was designed by a French decorator. This is part of what they call the upper cocktail lounge, and these patrons are enjoying a booth at the Gypsy Cellar Room. Well, this is some cellar, but look at this section of the main dining room. The Byzantine motif explodes with color. The gentleman on the right, by the way, is Mr. Alexis, and he was serving his guests a pie that would please the palate of a king.
The pie you see here at the table, which is served in my restaurant at Alexis, called kulibiaka. Kulibiaka in Germany used to be a classical dish called Kalbachen. Kal, cabbage, and backen means bake. Hope you will enjoy with the white Burgundy wine Morachet.
In a city noted for its fine food, still you won't find a better meal than at Alexis. After dinner, we're on the town searching for entertainment. There's a lot of variety to choose from, and we'll start at Goemon's Gay 90s.
And now, Goemon's Gay 90s cordially invite you to cheer the hero and boo and hiss the villain as we proudly present The Lust of Leonard Letchinglear.
Leonard!
Where am I? Where am I?
You're in Dutch. That's where you are. You can't fool me, Leonard. Oh, Leonard, why do you lead me on so, Leonard? Are we engaged?
Of course we're engaged.
Oh, then when are we going to get married? Have lots of little Eartha Mays running all around. That's my dream.
That's no dream. That's a nightmare. I'm allergic to children.
What if we got married? Right now, tonight!
What if we didn't? I bet you'd run out and marry the first man you met, wouldn't you?
I know.
A man who would slap you, beat you, enslave you, cheat on you. A man who wouldn't want you to have babies. You'd love that kind of a man, wouldn't you?
Why, no, Leonard, no.
You wouldn't?
No.
Well, then our engagement is off.
Oh, Leonard.
Midnight special, shine a light on me. There's a midnight special, shine every loving light on me.
Gold Street is perhaps the most unusual of San Francisco's many night spots. Exactly at the stroke of midnight, the management and its patrons celebrate New Year's Eve. Paper hats, confetti, noisemakers, the works. And this New Year's celebration takes place every night of the year, complete with at least one chorus of Old Lang Syne. Ladies and gentlemen, we wish to thank San Francisco's distinguished newspaper columnist, Mr. Herb Caen, for allowing us to use the title of his book, Baghdad by the Bay, on tonight's Armchair Vacation. And now a final stop, the gallery on Columbus Avenue in North Beach. While we were here, the gallery was exhibiting the work of 40 well-known Bay Area artists. And here was a graphic panorama of the many fascinating faces of San Francisco, its cultures, traditions, landmarks, and more, that certain elusive, wonderful something about the city that each artist tried to capture in his own way. And the last word to the ladies, San Francisco as a shopping center is almost without parallel. Shops that will make you think you're in New York, London, and Hong Kong, all at the same time.
Now until next week, Jack Douglas saying thank you so much and good night, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.